Hello, and welcome to Pop Culture on Deprogram with Keri Smith. I am one of your hosts, Keri, and I'm here with your anonymous mystery Chris host. How are you, mystery Chris?
Howdy, Keri. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I don't know if people know that if you move to Texas, because I know a lot of you are considering moving to Texas, it's a requirement that you say howdy once you get here. That's the Texas greeting.
I always pretend to tip my hat even though I'm not wearing a cowboy hat.
I'll imagine
you have to
doing
do
one.
it. You have to do it when you say it. You got to tip the hat.
Yeah. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I just want to put this on the screen right up top. Two Sisters and Some Yarn says, Chris's voice. Guy.
Hi, two sisters.
The ladies
Yeah.
the ladies love your voice. And
Yeah.
I know it's because you have a good voice, but also because they can't see your face. And so people, if you just give them one thing, then they're going to focus more on that.
Yeah. Yeah. And they'll imagine that, I'm the Denzel Washington's son or something.
Yeah. Jean Ellis says, hi, y'all. She said that's also fine in Texas. It's true.
I do say y'all a lot. I'll even type it on emails. I don't know if it's professional or not, and I don't really care because I'm from Texas.
Yeah, it's official to do that here. Oh, wait. Okay, I just plugged that in. That's better. So I want to get right into the topic because we're going to try and keep this just to an hour. I promised Nina Infinity I'm going to be on her show right after this. And so we're just going to try to keep to the hour. And I know you have a lot prepared. Before we get into it, I'll just say thank you for watching. If you're hanging out with us, this is a new channel. It's called Deprogrammed. And if you wouldn't mind hitting like and subscribe, we also have a locals and a subscribe star and a Patreon if you are able to and want to support the show financially. I think everybody on subscribe star has now received an email unless you subscribed in the past day. So we're going to try and move everybody's on subscribe star. You should automatically be a member on locals. That's where we're going to be doing our book club and some movie nights and things like that. So thank you for supporting. And without further ado, Mystery Chris is here to bring us all down and talk about the ways the government is using
We're going to try to keep it as positive as we can. It'll be a little tough, but hey.
Okay, so I have to admit, when you told me about the topic for tonight, predictive programming, I had never heard that term. Is that a commonly known phrase?
Not really. Like, it has kind of conspiracy implications. So, when people hear that, automatically go to kind of conspiracy stuff. And so, when we were talking earlier about it, I was kind of trying to make a point that there's influence from the government that we know about and from certain think tanks. Like, we'll get into one of them a little bit later. And usually what they emit is things that have to do around the public perception of what they do and, certain pieces of equipment that they want in there or not in certain movies or stories. But what we don't know for sure, and what a lot of people speculate about, is certain narratives, if that's being pushed, like things that have to do with something that it's not related to the CIA or the FBI or any of these other intelligence agencies or anything. And so stuff like, people who are reading things into maybe sometimes like Super Bowl halftime shows, like, a lot of people will say that, they're putting hidden messages in, halftime shows or music videos. Like, you'll see people who are breaking down Jay-Z doing the Illuminati thing. And,
Yeah.
It can get into some pretty wild areas. And, my goal wasn't to quite get into that far tonight, maybe another show, but, try to talk about some of what known influence that the government has on shows and movies.
Yeah, somebody in the chat earlier, and I apologize, I can't completely keep up with chat while doing this, but somebody said if you start to go down this hole of reading about predictive programming, that it's a rabbit hole you won't come out of for a while.
Yeah.
So,
It's easy, like, it's easy to identify maybe or make certain connections that aren't necessarily actual there. once
Yeah.
you start to read into things, and you don't want to become kind of like SJWs to start reading in racism and
Right.
other things into everything. So you
I
gotta.
can see how that could easily happen. Can we start just before you tell me about some of these examples? In case there's anybody else who doesn't know what predictive programming is, Cole, say hello to Cole, everyone. Cole, can you bring up our first article? This is from Ohio State University, and this is a paper. And I thought it was just a good sort of introduction to what predictive programming is. So I'll read a little bit of this. And you haven't seen this yet, right?
I haven't.
Okay. Predictive programming. Predictive programming is a theory that the government or other higher ups are using fictional movies or books as a mass mind control tool to make the population more accepting of planned future events. This was first described and proposed by researcher Alan Watt, who defines predictive programming as, quote, predictive programming is a subtle form of psychological conditioning provided by the media to acquaint the public with planned societal changes to be implemented by our leaders. If and when these changes are put through, the public will already be familiarized with them and will accept them as natural progressions, thus lessening possible public resistance and commotion, end quote. Okay, so then the article goes on to say, then it was popularized by Alex Jones and David Icke. The most notable, Icke, that's how much I know of that guy. The most notable cases of predictive programming are the examples found in The Simpsons, The Dark Knight Rises, The Hunger Games, and the oldest being from Futility, which I found out is a book, I think. Information can be found on blog posts, and many conspiracy theorists have either made videos on it or have spoken on the subject. People who believe in this theory are mostly conspiracy theorists who think there will be a totalitarian government takeover. Why would anybody think that?
What? No, the government loves us.
Why would, or on the more mild side, I love that they say that's not mild. When was this written? Have you seen what's happening in the world currently? On the more mild side, theorists who believe tragic events are an inside job or completely fake. David Icke proposed that the Sandy Hook shooting was predicted in The Dark Knight Rises because Sandy Hook is shown on the map in one of the scenes. While I was looking for more information on the motives behind the government participating in predictive programming, I found that most commonly, people believe the government creates a problem, so the population will look to the government for a solution. Okay, can I just interject here for a second, Mystery Chris, and tell you, why wouldn't the government do that? You know who does that? The pharmaceutical industry does that.
Mm-hmm.
So I used to have a friend. She went with me to Duke. She was incredibly smart, really great writer. She got this amazing job, amazing in terms of salary and benefits, but she had this job in New York. Her job was to write articles, ghostwrite articles on behalf of the pharmaceutical industry for problems, like to plant the seed of like, isn't this it's like 6 or 7 months before the drug would come out that would fix this problem. She would write these articles and give them to journalists, and they would publish them. It's like, oh, has anyone noticed the alarming increase in XYZ? And then 6 months later, they would roll the drug out. That was her job.
Yeah.
So if the pharmaceutical industry is doing that, why wouldn't the government do that?
Of course. Yeah, why did? And we know, a lot of people know that government has influence on the regular media. And so when they came out with these programs like, what was the FBI's program, I'm blanking on it, from when it came out in the 1970s, that they had a program to influence journalists in the media, Operation Mockingbird.
Mockingbird, it was the CIA.
Yeah. CIA. Yeah. FBI has their own program. They all do. But so we know this about the news. So why wouldn't they be doing it in movies and shows, scripted television and entertainment?
Right, exactly. Okay, I'm just going to finish the last part of this paragraph, and then you can give me some good examples. And we can go through them and decide, and you guys can decide in the chat if these are conspiracy theory or if there's something there. So the rest of this paragraph says, however, because the government planned for the crisis, the government will offer a solution that has been planned long before the crisis ever happened. Alan Watt, along with many others, believe a desired outcome is created through the power of suggestion in media. This theory is still very popular today because any huge event can be seemingly traced back to a cartoon or movie that was fortunate enough to predict it. Okay, that's enough of that piece. We get the gist now. If you didn't know what predictive programming is, we get the gist. So, what are some good examples that you know of? And I know you've told me some off camera, but tell me some that come to mind.
So ones that we know for sure are ones that people speculate as to there might be influence from the government.
Let me hear one that we know for sure first.
Well, a lot of them, the ones we know, are usually CIA and Department of Defense consult on movies. Like what's the Catherine Bigelow movie that came out?
The Hurt Locker.
Yeah, those type of military movies, we know that they consult on that. CIA is consulted on movies like Enemy of the State. That was that Will Smith movie. And, basically those type of movies, the CIA and FBI have a interest in making sure that they're portrayed in a more positive light, and that certain pieces of technology either are revealed or not talked about. So that's what's emitted. Now,
so I'm gonna jump in here because Cameron Pasha, who's been co-hosting with me some Mondays, is here, and he's talked about this before. He's a screenwriter in Hollywood, and he just offers a chat. He says, "And MK Ultra."
Yeah. And I talk about rabbit holes. I did a rabbit hole a while back ago where I was going down this rabbit hole looking for information on Return to Oz. If you remember that sequel to Wizard of Oz, and I came across this website that talked about how the movie, according to this person, not saying that this is true, but according to this person, that it was basically a kind of allegory for MK Ultra, because Dorothy in the beginning of the movie is she's having electroshock therapy because everyone thinks she's crazy, and she ends up going back into her mental state where she goes into the land of Oz. And this person was going down the list of all the similarities between what was happening on screen and what we know about MK Ultra. So I thought it was interesting. See, I'll entertain things. I'm not saying things are necessarily true. I'll entertain them because I like them.
Cameron also says, he gave us a super chat. Thank you, Cameron.
Yeah, thanks.
He says predictive programming comes from the dark occult in Hollywood. It is very real. I believe him.
Yeah.
What's interesting? You're mentioning MK Ultra and what was it called? Return to Oz.
Yes.
But you're also making me think of how sometimes they will put things that are real, they'll kind of make fun of them and make a comedy out of them so they can slide it in right under your noses. And I know some people talked about the movie Eyes Wide Shut in that way, or the movie Zoolander in that way, because Zoolander was sort of a spoof about MK Ultra. And Eyes Wide Shut is about this secret society of elites who meet in this sort of a cult environment. And is there something to that idea that if they put something in a movie that's real or has some seed, some kernel of reality, that then if things are ever leaked, everyone's like, oh, don't believe that. That sounds like a movie, right?
Right. Yeah, we've seen. Well, it's interesting because we were talking about before how V for Vendetta, and you gotta be careful since we're on YouTube, but how there's similarities between things going on now with a certain virus and a certain a form of medication that's being prescribed to help with this virus. So similar to that, there was World War Z. If you remember that movie with Brad Pitt, where they had the zombie virus, and United Nations had I don't know. Can I even say?
It's in a movie.
Shot. They had a little needle thing that was going to save the world if everyone just got it. And so there's a lot of things that you could say: is this predictive programming? Is this what's prepping people for it? Yeah. I mean, not just with those, but I've noticed a lot of movies, these kind of post-apocalyptic movies that have been coming out in the last few years, even shows like Discovery Channel had a whole series. It's like The World After Humans or something to that effect. and shows that are talking about, you know, how the earth would be better off without humans. Look, nature has reclaimed all the terrible things we've done to the planet, you know, just all this, you know, nonsense. I mean, you could also look at the first Kingsman movie, where Samuel Jackson played a billionaire who wanted to depopulate the earth. And he even mentioned a thing called Gaia theory, which is a real theory.
What's Gaia theory?
It's basically that the earth is a living organism, and that us human beings are basically a cancer that's eating away at it. And so a lot of the Malthusian types buy into that, and they put that for it, you know, that aspect of the environmental movement. So
I've heard people refer to us in that way. A lot of them from my time spent in the left who kind of refer to us as a plague. Let me interject for 1 second. We have a big super chat from Scott Wellman. Thank you, sir. He says, why do I feel like the 2019 Joker film is the antithesis to predictive programming? The whole point, I thought, about its storytelling was that you come to your own conclusion about the character. What do you think about that?
Yeah, you could definitely see stuff in Joker. You know, Joker's kind of portrayed as a victim of society. He's very heavily medicated, and you know, he's very reacting. He's very reactionary to things that are happening around him that slowly kind of moved him to becoming more violent, and he ends up leading a revolution. I remember at the very end of the Joker, where a big riot breaks out and people chanting his name and going crazy. It reminded me a lot of the riots that happened in 2020. And so you could make a connection there, perhaps, you know, setting the stage for, you know, it's kind of anarchy and demanding that the system, you know, collapse in the same way that Bane in The Dark Knight Rises, you know, was demanding that, you know, the elites finally pay, and kind of leading this populist revolution against them. So,
yeah. Well, let's get back to the ones that you said we have evidence of. Are there any more? You gave examples of, you know, we know that the government has, you know, consults on TV and film projects, pushes certain pieces of propaganda or attitudes that they want us to adopt. I have a whole slideshow prepared. I don't know if we have time for it, but it's movies that throughout the course of history have had some type of influence by the government to either push for a war effort or against a certain dictator, or, you know, they have involvement in our popular culture. You also mentioned Project Mockingbird, MK Ultra. Is there anything else that we know? Like, look, this is an example of the government sticking their finger in entertainment.
well, I do remember that the government consulted on Independence Day, that they didn't want. Well, they started to consult, but the producers of Independence Day insisted on Area 51 remaining in the movie because that's where the aliens are at. And so the government, after that, was like, if you're not going to take that out, then we're not going to have any involvement with this production. And I think the whole Area 51 thing is a distraction for something else. I don't think there's actual like alien stuff there, but that was one big example. The show 24, Kiefer Sutherland, that was another one. Hulk, I believe it's the first Hulk movie. The CIA, I believe, wanted them to make a number of changes to the script, and there's been another Contact in the Jodie Foster one. Pentagon wanted them to portray the military in a certain manner in that movie. So it's so many movies. There's actually been some Freedom of Information acts been done, or requests that have gotten a lot of files that have talked about these movies that the CIA has consulted on. And so there's a lot.
You're also making me think of, oh gosh, I saw a movie recently. It was within the past year. Help me out here, because you know all these movies. It was a superhero movie. Oh, it was Suicide Squad 2. Did you see that?
Yeah.
So there's this really funny part where, on the one hand, they find that the government has been up to all this shady business, up to no good, right? But then, so they're portraying the government as being shady, which, okay, it is. Thank you. But then they portray the media as being virtuous. There's a part at the end where I could believe all of it. I could believe Ferret Man and all of the superpowers and everything,
Yeah.
but I couldn't believe that at the end they said, if we can just get this information to the media and get it out, then they'll fix everything. It's like the media is in bed with the government. What are you talking about? That would never happen.
I know. Is that predictive programming to make you trust the media? Mm-hmm.
Trust the media. Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
so what are some then that you think that this author of this paper would say these reside in the land of conspiracy theory?
Well, there's ones like The Lone Gunman, if you remember. That was a spinoff to The X-Files. The very first episode, I think it was the pilot, dealt with, I think it was a terrorist attack where planes were flown into the World Trade Center tower, and the government turned out to be behind this act. Now, this came out, I believe it was the summer before. It may have been summer 2000, I think, that this came out. Right before the 9/11 attacks. So,
yeah, I tend to think.
Is that a coincidence?
Yeah, I tend to think that's a coincidence.
Yeah.
Is the programming working on me? But yeah, kind of like you can any world event. One thing I do agree with in the paper is you could probably find some bit of media that looks like, oh, that was prophetic, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. You can go backwards and find things and go, oh, well, that kind of looks like it was predicting this. That's kind of like the Nostradamus stuff. You can go, oh, yeah, well, kind of suggesting this. But, sometimes things are it's a little weird how accurate sometimes certain things are.
We have a. You want to read this one?
Honest day, Pierre. You should all trust your government. It's the right thing to do. Farewell.
Thank you, Abraham Lincoln's tech-savvy ghost. Nice. Okay, so there's the X-Files with the 9/11, two planes, and the government being behind it. And okay, what else? What's another one?
Well, the ones I've already mentioned, with V for Vendetta, World War Z.
So V for Vendetta, for anybody who doesn't know, there's a scene in that movie where they're talking about this virus. You're right. We're living in a
so
time
hard. You don't know what to what can I say? Damn it.
They're talking about a virus, and and they have already developed the treatment for it. And when they release it. And so somebody could look at that probably and say, aha, see, that's predictive programming. They were getting us ready for this. I don't know. Again, that's not what happened. So.
And it was the virus is used to usher in this fascist government. So, And I know a lot of that is taken from the comic, and the comic was more of a critique against Margaret Thatcher. And when this came out, the movie came out, it's kind of a critique of Bush and, feelings people have, Bush administration being fascist. And it's like, well, you haven't seen nothing yet.
Yeah, if only we had known. Cameron Pasha says, yeah, it did. It worked on Keri. Okay, so V for Vendetta. And then you were telling me there was a Simpsons episode.
There's a Simpsons episode. There's about a couple moments in The Simpsons. One of them, I remember seeing a clip around the pandemic started where it was these group of elites that were talking about putting out some kind of virus. Again, I'm trying to center myself. Putting this out and using the media to gin up a bunch of fear and then having a treatment available ready to make a lot of money.
Do you think that sometimes it's just the collective unconscious where we're moving in a certain direction and people have different ideas about what might happen? And obviously, if you're a creative person, you're writing for a TV show, you might be able to predict the way something goes. And like a lot of these dystopian fiction writers, books like 1984 or Brave New World, I'm sure in the right context, somebody could look at that and say that was programming. you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of that was just taken from communism, so it's not that hard to kind of extrapolate from history, things that have already happened, and just thinking about how technology can use to bring about certain things that happened in the past that, you know, governments want to do to the population. So, yeah, some of these things could be just people who just paid attention to history and just thought about, you know, how things would work in the increasing technology and the way that affects our lives, and what kind of how that'll affect governments, and the amount of corruption that it will breed. And so, yeah, some of this stuff I think they did on their own. Other things are like, yeah, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Do you want me to bring up one of these articles that you sent me?
Yeah. So if we could bring up before we do that one, I just want to. Can we bring up the image of Stacey Abrams? I'm sorry if anyone's eating, but so Stacey Abrams, you don't know, she was in a episode of Star Trek Discovery this past week's the last episode.
Wait a minute. This is Stacey Abrams, the politician, correct?
The politician, yes. She's playing President of the World, and it's a surprise cameo. She comes out, and everyone's so happy to see her, and and the thing is, listen, Star Trek's had a lot of cameos in the past. None I could think of were politicians, unless you want to count Abraham Lincoln, who was an episode of the original series, who called for a negress. I mean, it's pretty accurate, I think. But but they've never done the politicians, and putting any politician, for that matter, in the role, or just the show in general, is going to have people are going to view that as making some kind of statement, a political statement. Like the writers, you know what the culture is right now. You know what the political environment is right now. You know what the perceptions will be, but you still chose to put a politician. And I don't want any politician. You know, it's not just that it's Stacey Abrams. I don't want anyone, even if I like them. I don't want them there, because that immediately takes me out of the story, and I'm concentrated more on what statement is being made by the writers and producers by making these moves, rather than immersing myself in the story that's occurring on screen.
It is necessarily a political action to put a politician in the role that should be occupied by an actor.
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing if it's on SNL. We're used to seeing SNL as a comedy show. They bring on all kinds of personalities, not just actors. They bring on comedians and musicians and politicians, but in a fictional show, to cast a controversial, especially a controversial politician, instead of casting an actor, they are definitely making a statement. You can't say they're not trying to make a statement.
And it's not just that she was in the show, specifically that she's playing the president of the world. Like, they could have easily made her like a tech, or someone just in the background. Seriously, they could. They've done that with celebrities. Mae Jemison, who is the first Black woman in space, she was on an episode of Next Generation where she played a transporter tech, and that was one that, you had some articles saying, first Black woman, and of course talking about how she was inspired by her and stuff, but a huge deal wasn't made of it, and it's just kind of like a thing. But with her specifically putting her in this role, does seem to suggest that they want viewers to view her in a certain way, to view her as being elite and being in these higher positions. Because I'm pretty sure she has eyes on running for president. Doesn't mean that's realistic, but I'm sure she wants to run for a higher office. And so, because I believe she contacted Star Trek because she's a fan, and in fact, actually 2020, there was a Trek the Vote campaign fundraisers for Democrats that a lot of Trek actors were a part of, and she and Cory Booker were leading this meeting.
Let me guess. Meeting. George Takei had something to do with that.
I'm sure he did. I'd have to look it up, but that's not the first time they associated Trek with politics. Because in 2016, they had Trekkers Against Trump, was a memo that 50 of the actors, producers, and writers signed on to demanding that people not only not support Donald Trump, but specifically vote for Hillary. Because like I read the thing, and they started off, doing thing like, both sides are kind of corrupt and stuff. I was like, okay, but then they're like, but only one of the politicians running for president right now has the right stuff. This person is a dignitary. This person has the leadership and the resume to lead us all to a better, most peaceful future, and that person is Hillary Clinton. And then they lost me. I was like, oh. So
did you mail back your Star Trek membership card?
I teared it up.
I'm not kidding, guys. Mystery Chris has an adorable Star Trek. What's it called?
It's a Star Trek ID.
It's from when he was a kid.
And I was Captain Enterprise. Yes. It was good times.
You didn't tear it up, send it back.
And cry. But yeah, so this got me thinking a little bit about predictive programming, but specifically another incident that happened in Star Trek Picard, which is one of the new shows that's airing on the streaming service. And in this new series, the characters get transported to a fascist future. Shocking. And there's obviously allusion to Trump and Trump rallies, and the future, this fascist future, there's xenophobia. The humans are all together. They want to eradicate all the aliens in the universe. So they're setting up another allegory for, illegal immigration, which is what they did the first season. But this time it's more in your face. And so in order to stop this fascist future, they have to go back to 2024 in LA. And so one of the characters, while talking to, yes, Red Letter Media is awesome. Yeah, they did some good reviews lately. They're tearing the show apart, rightfully so. But one of the characters, she's giving kind of a pep talk to the other characters who are going to go out on the street of LA and telling them how to blend in. And she makes this comment about people having a vaccine chip. And this comment's made not saying that it's bad or that this is what leads to that fascist future. It's just made as the comment just comes out just like, oh, this is just what everyone has. So you might need, to disguise yourself or have this or something in order to blend in because you don't want to, stand out. And that really stood out to me about, specifically predictive programming, because the idea of these chips type stuff, first of all, the media didn't really acknowledge it for a while. I mean, they had Bill Gates come on to the media and give a spiel about it and stuff, but kind of like we were saying earlier, where they kind of crazify certain things, like where they start saying that people thought that the certain form of medication being handed out for this virus that's going on right now, that how people who don't want to be forced to take that think that there's microchips in this medication, which is not true. I'm sure you could find some schizophrenic people that believe that, but most people don't. Their concerns are a lot more reasonable and rational. Yeah. But with this, they're just kind of coming out with it and just saying, oh, yeah, it's kind of normalizing the idea that, in the future we'll have these.
That's exactly the definition of predictive programming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is trying to normalize something, not making it a major plot point, or critiquing it or warning about it, but just kind of smoothing it over like, oh, of course, in the future, this is a thing that will be normal.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it seemed like they were just trying to familiarize people with that, just calmly and casually just kind of put that in to get people kind of used to it. So that made me think of an article I read years ago about how the Rand Corporation, aka the Bland Corporation from Dr. Strangelove, how the Rand Corporation consulted with the creators of the original Star Trek in 1964. And we have an article about that. And Cole, if you could pull up that article I sent you, it should be the one labeled Star Trek.
Is this the one, Captain Kirk's predecessor?
Yes. So Jeffrey Hunter, he played Captain before Kirk. And he did an interview in 1964 when they were filming the pilot, talking about how the Rand Corporation was consulting with Star Trek producers to put in, certain ideas specifically related to technology. And so I'm going to read just a little bit. So, actor Jeffrey Hunter, who played Captain Christopher Pike in Star Trek Pilot The Cage, told a Hollywood columnist in January of '65 that he hoped the pilot episode would be picked up as a series because he was intrigued by the fact that the series is based on Rand Corporation's projection of things to come. Now, we should know in several weeks whether the show has been sold, Hunter said almost half a century ago, be hour long, color, keeps going on. So he says, the things that intrigues me most, Hunter said, is that it's actually based on Rand Corporation's projection of things to come. Except the fictional characters, it will be like getting a look into the future, and some predictions will surely come true in our lifetime. This article goes on to talk about how one of the guys who worked for the Rand Corporation consulted on making or designing the bridge for Star Trek, other pieces of technology. It says here that in Rand Corporation, the series limited to technical advice by Rand researcher Harvey P. Lynn Jr., as Trek Plays points out. He provided the original series creator Gene Roddenberry with scientific and technological advice during pre-production of the series. And Rand Corporation goes on to talk about how they keep stressing that he did that on his own. They don't say that it came from them, but who knows with that.
Right.
But the article also goes on to talk about, similarities with the Federation and, those people who are pushing for, say, world government. If you look at the United Nations flag, it's basically what the Federation flag is. And other things, let's see here. So if you scroll down a little bit more, please. So despite Rand's own statement that Lynn was consulted as a private citizen, the article goes to say that at first Lynn worked informally on a series. Later, he paid a whopping $50 per show for the use of his brain expertise, contribute indispensable insights that helped shape ideas like the ship's computer. He suggested that it talk in a woman's voice. The sick bay, he suggested the beds be outfitted with electrical pickups, the monitor, the body, and teleportation. And then this goes on to define predictive program. Basically sounds like it got the same source that the article that you were reading from earlier. It mentions Alan Watt, who kind of came up with that term. If you scroll down a little bit more, please.
I bet, are you trying to get to the paragraph about that starts as Daniel Brandt? Because that one's really interesting.
We can go that one. Let's see which one is that one. Yes, there we go. So, as Daniel Brandt wrote in his article, Philanthropist at War, the interlocking system of foundation and think tanks after World War II were part of the push by central banks to establish by stealth a one world government. And this global system of control, as Carroll Quigley brought to light in his Tragedy and Hope, would not be idealized. Let's all come together in peace sort of political utopia. Rather, this thousand-headed creature was forced into being and controlled by the major central banks on the planet acting in concert. Quigley, by the way, described Rand Corporation as a private research and development firm under contract of the United States Air Force, Brandt wrote. Covert foreign policy became the standard mode of operation after World War II, which was also when Ford Foundation became a major player for the first time. The institute most involved in classified research was Rand Corporation, set up by the Air Force in 1948. The interlocks between the trustees of Rand and the Ford, Rockefeller, and Carnegie Foundation was numerous that the Reese Committee lists them in its report, 2 each for Carnegie and Rockefeller and 3 for Ford. Ford gave $1 million to Rand in 1952 alone, at a time when chairman of Rand was simultaneously the president of the Ford Foundation. Well, I wonder how that worked. The involvement of Rand in Star Trek, presumably far from an isolated experiment. In July 2011, by an article by Daniel Taylor of Old Thinker News, the article, or Arthur writes about a trailer for video game Deus Ex Human Revolution, getting people ready for a transhumanist future in which a man merges with the machine. Taylor points to a report prepared by Rand for the National Intelligence Council titled The Global Technology Revolution. In this 2001 report, the themes are outlined as possibilities. These possibilities then magically find their way into fictional formats such as movies and video games. And then this article concludes where the author was talking about he's a Star Trek fan, but it's sad that he had to found out about this and report on this, and it sucks because I love Star Trek. I mean, I still think Star Trek's great, but
so what do you think? Taking everything you just read in this article and the stuff that you've seen on Star Trek, because you've watched all of it. I know this. You've tried to force me to watch it many times.
Yes. I will never stop.
Tell me what is it if they are engaging in predictive programming and trying to get humanity to become more adjusted to societal changes that they have planned, or even if they're just trying to get us to become more accepting of certain beliefs or ideologies, like what is it that you think that they're pushing? What is their agenda?
Well, I know a lot of people have accused Star Trek of promoting communism for a while, and I don't fully buy into that because I think the view of the future has similarities to what maybe certain communists want, but the future in Star Trek is built on this post-scarcity world, this model in which all human beings have all the material needs met. And so because of this, people are free to engage and pursue higher-minded things and to increase their knowledge and explore the galaxy. And so truthfully, a lot of the economics in Star Trek don't make sense because, these writers they're writing drama, they're not economists, and a lot of them haven't devoted a lot of time to really explain this because it doesn't really make sense when you think about it.
Why don't they get an economist for their writer's room? They got a politician for their actors.
I know. It'd be funny if they had like Janet Yellen or someone on it, but yeah. But yeah, so a lot of people think that, I've seen criticism of Star Trek think that it's promoting communism or that kind of worldview, and I don't necessarily agree. Again, there's similarity. I don't think it's necessarily the same thing because even in the original Star Trek, you have to remember that the writers of the original Star Trek, many of them served in World War II, and many of them had a view of what freedom and what America was about, and they put that into the show like in the 60s. There are a lot of episodes in which Captain Kirk or Spock would go down to a planet that would be ruled over by some kind of computer or alien that was basically a central controller of that planet, of that system. And Kirk would make an argument that people were not being free because all beings in the galaxies had rights, that it was this universalist belief that all beings, had inalienable rights that could not be taken away from them. Therefore, he used that as a reason to violate the Prime Directive and, setting these people free. And then, of course, he'd always leave and never come back. But
you're talking about Captain Kirk, right?
Yeah.
So this is a long time ago. The government, if they are trying to push certain ideas or get us on board throughout history, in some of these films that they're pushing, in some cases, people to support a war or to be against a certain dictator or leader in another country, the U.S. government's interests have changed over time.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think about how in the 60s, their interests were probably a lot different in some ways than they are now. Now, some things are the same, but think about how in the 60s, the FBI was very concerned with communism.
Mm-hmm.
They were wiretapping people. They were wiretapping people like MLK, like Martin Luther King Jr., because they thought because of his association with communists, and they were very anti-communist. Now, I would say, if they were infiltrating, infiltrating is not the right word. If they were influencing entertainment in the 60s, they're going to be influencing it in a really different way than they are now, right?
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of, if there is influence, what I think there is, but I think a lot of influence is more promoting just kind of more nihilistic stories. Because, we've talked about before how the CIA in the 1950s supported abstract expressionist painting. Like, I don't think there's any definite proof that they supported Jackson Pollock, but I'm pretty sure they did. And they said that they were promoting it to promote American values over Soviet values, and saying, look, people are so free that they can do these paintings where they're doing splatter art and things. And so if you take that on face value, sure. But at the same time, the abstract expressionist art was non-representational. It represented nothing. It was ultimately, I kind of view it as a bit nihilistic. Ultimately, their beauty wasn't being represented in these paintings. It was just random shapes and colors and things that, of course, they rationalized, saying, Jackson Pollock was tapping into his subconscious and doing all the other things. And so I could see how certain people within government or rich financiers could be pushing a lot of entertainment these days that are promoting these ideas that there's essentially no good or evil. Because you look at this trend of movies coming out based on villains. I mean, the Joker, as we were talking about earlier, Venom, Cruella de Vil, they're planning to come out with a bunch of villain movies for Spider-Man. Ninja Turtles going to have a bunch. So many, Ninja Turtles. They're supposed to do a bunch of spin-offs. Batman's having spin-offs with, like, the Penguin's going to have a show, HBO. So you're seeing all these traditional villains being portrayed as kind of sympathetic and being portrayed as, victims of society, that, it's solely the environment that has the influence on them and making decisions that they make, rather than someone just being evil. It's essentially arguing that evil doesn't really exist.
Let me guess. Evil, they're going to present the view that evil arises from oppression, right? Systemic oppression, and we all need to redistribute power among different identity groups in order to prevent evil.
Yeah, so I think that's where a lot of the funding's going, and just promoting all this kind of mess that's just because it's having an effect on people. I mean, a lot of people, we all love stories, and stories influence our behavior, whether we know it or not. It influences our morals and the way we perceive people, and the way we think about ourselves, and what how we should behave. And you've kind of seen this decline where we've gone from heroes and some anti-heroes to a lot of anti-heroes in, like, the 1970s, and then we start getting into more murky territory. That kind of happened with Star Trek a little bit by bit. You kind of move from the more relativist kind of position, because the original series was very had a strong stance on morality and universal rights. But as things went on, you start to see that relativism kind of creep in. And so now I think you're just seeing an explosion of it in entertainment right now.
Jordan Peterson talks about this a little bit with children's movies. And if you look at the old Disney films, how they had a very clear-cut moral foundation, or they were trying to impart moral lessons, and that those lessons have changed in Disney films over time. So you're no longer seeing lessons that are universal about, why you shouldn't lie, like in Pinocchio. You're seeing more of the we live in a world where people get things because they're boys, and that's not right, and women need to rise up, and they're getting that social justice programming now, right, in some cases, rather than just universal moral instruction on how to best be in the world.
Yeah. And don't forget how many Disney movies feature characters that come from single parent households. Did you ever notice about that? Especially like a lot of those animated features, starting with The Little Mermaid and on up, but just how many of them just only had one parent.
Bambi. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I definitely think there's something to that.
I'm going to just see if I can make you laugh for a second, Mr. Chris, with that people in the chat are cracking me up. Scott Miller said that they're going back to that Stacey Abrams picture that you showed of her on Star Trek, which I thought was a joke at first.
It looks so low budget.
Do you want to read this one?
She actually lost the Federation election, but ate the actual winner.
Oh noes! You are oppressing people with your humor. Cameron Pasha, don't they have gyms in the 24th century? Why is the Federation president out of
Exactly.
shape?
Yeah, can't they just go to like a sick bay and just use some device to like zap the fat off?
Oh, look, it's Abraham Lincoln's tech-savvy ghost again with another ghostly super chat. He says, I never had to rely on these cheap parlor tricks when I was alive. And can we please stop talking about actors? Who is that? I'll fight you naked. Thank you, sir. Says Project Mockingbird is just out in the open. Brennan is a regular on CNN. Anderson Cooper was a CIA, quote, intern. I'm sure he just went out for coffee. Yeah, haven't they officially? They've never said that Project Mockingbird ended. Is that correct? Someone correct me in chat.
Well, that's same thing with like COINTELPRO, we're a counterintelligence program where they were spying, like you were mentioned earlier. They were spying on civil rights groups. They're also spying on hate groups, college groups, anti-war groups in the 60s. Basically anything that J. Edgar Hoover thought was undermining America, or specifically him.
Anyone with cultural capital. So, like Martin Luther King wasn't a politician. John Lennon wasn't a politician, but these were figures who had a lot of cultural power and the ability to influence and sway people. And I think that famous Andrew Breitbart quote is true. And I think they know this, which is that politics follows culture. I mean, look at woke. Woke came from the culture first. It came from the universities, from academia first. Then it infiltrated politics.
Yeah, politics and entertainment.
Yeah. So, guys, we're doing a quick one today because I promised Nina Infinity I'm going to be on her show right after this. If you guys want to come hang out on Nina's channel. So I think we have about 5 minutes left. Let's read a couple more super chats from people, and then we'll call it a night. You guys were making me laugh so hard. Let me see. Oh, wow. There's a lot of comments. Sorry. Deep Space Nine and the Ferengi were capitalists. What is that?
Oh, the Ferengi. So there are alien species that love capitalism. They love gold and having money. And they're kind of they're used more as humor in Deep Space Nine. And they kind of contrasted between this quasi-socialist federation and yet the capitalist Ferengi. I'm gonna make you watch some Deep Space Nine episodes.
Oh, it will happen. Now that we're doing this pop culture show again, it's like, okay, it has to happen. Twee Girl says the Smurfs promoted communism, socialist men under a red father. I heard this when I was a kid. I was in one of those states. I was in South Carolina, where everybody was saying that the Smurfs were communists or they were Satan worshippers, like because of Gargamel's name, and there were all these reasons why we weren't supposed to be watching the Smurfs.
Yeah, I'm reading a book on the Satanic Panic, and on a future episode, I want us to talk about all that.
Which book are you reading?
I think it's the one I showed you. I think it's called The Satanic Panic. I think it's on my bookshelf. I can't see right now, but
I would love to talk about that. I wrote a paper on that when I was in college. Because at the time, remember all those, now we're getting off subject, but there were all those different cases of day schools, preschools and stuff, daycare centers, that's the right word, where kids were having these recovered memories of satanic ritual abuse. And these daycare centers were being shut down. And do you remember all of that? I mean, obviously, if you're reading about it, though.
I haven't gotten to that part. I do remember some of the Dungeons and Dragons stuff. And I watch a lot of bad movies. And a while back, I watched Mazes and Monsters, which was a TV movie that was part of the Satanic Panic. And this one starred Tom Hanks as a college kid who gets so obsessed with playing this game, this Dungeons and Dragons type game, that he actually thinks he's in the game. He starts hallucinating, and he basically is running around the streets of New York while his friends are trying to get him. And it's pretty hilarious.
Just really quick, Nina Infinity popped into the chat. Did you see her?
Hey Nina.
It's hard to keep up. There she is. She says Deep Space Nine is amazing, Keri.
Yes, I love Deep Space Nine. It's
You
my
guys
favorite
have to
shows.
meet. You would totally geek out, and I would just go to the cottage in my head while you talk. So I want to, since we have to end tight hour tonight, guys, I want to end on this. Miss Jean Ellis, thank you. She says, so leave us with some hope to change things to the best. Give us some hope.
I'm a big proponent of trying to find independent producers and people making movies and shorts and stuff. And so there's a channel on YouTube called Dust, and it's also on Roku and other ones, where it's nothing but science fiction shorts. And so usually like 5 to 10-minute movies, short, mini movies. And I've been watching a lot of those, and I just love that there are a lot of people who are still trying to make more original as you can be science fiction stories and tales. And I feel like we all need to be on lookout and try to support up and coming filmmakers and people making these projects. I mean, yeah, they're not going to be as technical savvy as a lot of these Hollywood productions, but they are getting better. A lot of these independent short films are getting a lot better. And so I'm very hopeful and really looking forward to seeing what's going to come.
That's great. Yeah, who cares about if they're high tech yet or not, if they have a good story, good acting, good writing. Marby Dog says, up with hope, down with dope. Yes. Yes.
Does Dare still exist, by the way?
Who?
Dare, do you remember? It was the school thing where kids are getting drugs.
I don't know. I mean, the government's giving out free crack pipes now, so I don't know if they'd be highly invested in dare kids not to do
fight
drugs.
Drug addiction with crack pipes.
Did I ever tell you when I was in Tanzania, I used to see people wearing the funniest shirts, because a lot of things from that get donated here get sent over to different countries. And you would sometimes see people wearing shirts and they didn't know what they said in English. In the part of Tanzania I was in, English is also a national language there now. President Nyerere made it the second national language, so it's Swahili and English. But in some of the remote parts of Tanzania, there'd be people who didn't speak English. And I saw this one guy wearing a Dare shirt, like anti-drug shirt, and he's smoking a huge blunt.
Oh, I wish I had a picture. That just encapsulates perfect.
Perfect. Another time I saw a guy wearing a bright pink shirt. It was made for a lady, clearly. And it said from 0 to bitch in 60 seconds.
That's awesome.
This kind of cultural things where it's just like, do you know what that means? No. Okay, I gotta go. But one day I'll tell you another story about Tanzania, about the the sports brand Fila?
Yeah.
Okay. Just remind me of that on a future episode.
Okay.
Thank you guys for hanging out with us tonight. Thanks for visiting us on the Deprogram channel. If it's your first time here, please hit like and subscribe, or hit the alarm bell so you get notifications. We are up and running. We have a locals you can join. We have a Subscribe Star and a Patreon. If you want to support us financially, you can use any of those 3 methods. If you're not able to do that or not willing to commit to that, you can also help us just by liking or telling people about the show, or suggesting things for us to talk about in the comments. If you have questions for us, I am going to be announcing the winner of the knife on Friday. So tune in for Kerfefe Break on Friday, and we'll be picking a winner. And and tomorrow, the knitters. I got to talk to this amazing guy who's Neil, who started Blocked Magazine in the knitting world. And he's really pushing back against social justice ideology. And he was delightful. And that interview is coming out tomorrow on Deprogrammed at 6 o'clock Texas time. So thank you guys. Thank you, Cole, for helping us with tech.
Yeah, thanks, Cole.
Okay. Roll it.